So welcome everyone to this demonstration on SANnav Management Portal Configuration Policy Management. So in this demonstration, we're going to use the SANnav Management Portal to import a configuration block set from a switch, import and customize a maps policy from a switch, then we're going to create a configuration policy, then add our configuration block set and our customized maps policy to it. Then we're going to push this configuration policy out to our switches. Then we're going to detect and fix configuration drifts. For more information, be sure to check out the course SANnav Management Portal Configuration Policy Management. The course code there is MPCP-222. So to get to the Configuration Policies Management page, at the top you want to click on the SANnav tab. And over on the left-hand side, if not already selected, click on SAN Monitoring to display its sub-menu. Then click on Configuration Policies Management. This will bring up the Policies page. Notice toward the upper left-hand side, there are two tabs, Policies and Blocks. So in this section, we're going to import a block set from a switch. So we're going to click on the Blocks tab. Then toward the upper right-hand corner, there's that plus button. We're going to click on that to open its pull-down menu. You can see you have three options there. One is configurations. This is how you can create a configurations block set from scratch. One is SANnav maps. This is how you can create a maps policy from scratch. And the third option is import. When you import, you have two options. One is import from a file, and one is import from a switch. So let's say, for example, that I was on a different SANnav Management Portal instance, and I created this custom configuration policy. I could export this configuration out to a JSON file, and then come to this SANnav Management Portal instance, click on this plus button, and click on Import to import this configuration into this SANnav Management Portal instance. But in this example, however, we're going to import this from a switch. So we are going to click on Import. This will bring up the import dialog, and again, you can see those two options there, import from a file or import from a switch. If you import from a file, you just browse to the location, select the file, and import it. In this example, we're going to import from a switch. We're going to click on that. This will bring up the import dialog and showing all the switches that are managed by SANnav Management Portal. In this example, we're going to click on switch SW4. Then at the bottom, you have two options, import configurations or import maps. In this example, we're going to import configurations and click on the OK button. This will bring up the Select Configurations dialog. By default, all configuration blocks are selected. At the top where it says Select All, you can click on that to either select or deselect all of the configurations. You can also go through and select or deselect individual blocks. For example, we don't want DNS in this example, we don't want LDAP, we don't want radius, and we don't want TACX. So when you have the blocks selected that you want to actually import, click on the OK button. This will bring up the Create New page with those blocks imported. At the top, you want to provide this block set with a name. Optional but recommended is provide a tag and description. Then you can go through the blocks and make any configuration changes that you wish. If you want to remove a block, for example, if I want to remove this SFTP block, over on the right-hand side there's this X, I can click on that. I can remove that block from the configuration. So I'll do that. And you can scroll down. Anything that you see with the red triangle, for example, SNMP version 3, needs to be either configured or removed. So I'm going to remove that one as well. And I'm going to continue to scroll down. When I have this how I want it, I'm just going to click on the Save button. This returns me back to the blocks page, and notice my configuration has been saved. It's called edu_import_configurations. You can see it's configuration custom. You can see it was created by the administrator. You can see when it was last modified. And over on the far right-hand side, there is a down arrow. Click on that to open its pull-down menu. You see there's two options there. I can click on View. That'll bring up the details page for this configuration where changes can be made. Or I can export this configuration out to a JSON file. Now let's take a look at importing and customizing a MAPS policy. So in this section of the demo, we're going to import a MAPS block set from what we call a golden switch, and we'll show you how to make some adjustments to rule names and rules. So here we are at the blocks page. Toward the upper right hand side, there's the plus button. We'll click on that to open this pull down menu and click on import. This will bring up the import dialog. Notice you have two options here. You can import from a file or import from a switch. In this example, we're going to import from the switch. This will bring up the import dialog showing you all the switches that are managed by SANnav Management Portal. We're going to select our switch. In this example, a switch called SW6. And notice at the bottom you have two options, either configurations or maps. In this example, I'm going to click on maps and click on the OK button. This will bring up the create new page showing you all the rules that were imported. So the first thing you want to do is provide this block set with a name. Optional but recommended is to provide a tag and description. And below that we see the rules table. Notice there's 12 category types. You can click on that to open its pull down menu. And you can see all the categories. At the top where it says select all, you can click on that to either select or deselect all the category types. So for example, if I just want the port category, I can click on that to show just the port category rules. Next to that, there's a magnifying glass. If I click in there, I can type in, for example, link failure. And now it gives me all the port categories, but notice the measure type is link failure. Let's say I want to change some rule names. I could do this in bulk. This example, I'll select 3 of them. Now, when you do this, you have to identify the rule. So a little cheat here is to copy the first part of that rule name. Toward the upper right-hand side, there's the hamburger icon. Click on that to open its pull-down menu. Click on Edit. So here you can edit the actions or the rule name. I'm going to edit the rule name. I'm going to search on default all _D, and I'm going to change that to edu _D. This is an easy way to change rule names in bulk if you need to. Click the OK button. It says 3 out of 3 selected rules will be edited. The following rule names will be edited. Expand that out, and you can see what rule names, what the original rule name is, and what the new rule name is. Click the OK button. Close out of that. This will bring us back to the policy. And again here, if we search for link failure, we should see those 3 rules with new names. Let's say I want to make changes to one of the rules. I could click on this down arrow on the far right hand side, but I want to show you a shortcut, which I always forget to use myself. You can right click anywhere on that row, and it'll bring up that same little pop-up menu. Click on View to bring up the rule dialog where I can make changes to that rule. For example, if I want to change the rule name, I can do that. If I want to change the contents of the rule, for example, maybe I want 3 link failures, and perhaps maybe I want to get rid of the SNMP trap as one of the actions. I can save that rule. I can save it or save as. I'm just going to save it. If I do a save as there, it would keep the original rule as well as the new rule. If I save it, it'll overwrite the original rule. Or we can see that new rule right here. Notice it's _3. The threshold is now greater than 3, and the trap is no longer one of the action events. If we have this set up now how we want it, we can click the Save button. This will return back to the blocks page. Notice our custom maps block set called edu _SANnav _moderate policy has been saved. We can right click to bring up that little pop-up menu. We click on View to make changes. Click on Merge to merge 2 maps policies. For example, maybe I created a custom maps policy with a few rules in it. I want to merge that with this policy. I can do the same thing, but I can merge that from a firmware version, or I can export this policy out, where I can import it into a different SANnav Management Portal instance. Now let's create a policy and push that policy out to the switches. Okay, now that we've created our custom configuration and customized one of the default maps policies, we're now ready to create a configuration policy. So to do that, I want to click on the Policies tab to bring up the Policies page. Then to create a new policy, just click on that plus button toward the upper right-hand corner to open its pull-down menu and click on Create New. This will bring up the Create New SANnav Policy page. Here we want to provide it a name. I'm going to call it edu_policy. Optional again, but recommended is provide tag and description. Next, we want to select our blocks. So we click on this hamburger icon to open its pull-down menu. Click on Add. This will bring up the Add Blocks dialog. This example, we're going to click on that edu_import configuration that we created and the edu_SANnav_moderate policy that we created. Notice the first policy is a configuration policy. The next one is a SANnav maps policy. When ready, click on the OK button. This will add those block sets to our policy. Next, we want to associate the switches. So again, click on that hamburger icon for the associated switches table to open its pull-down menu and click on Add. This will bring up the Add Switches dialog. Next to the column header name, we can click on that to either select or deselect all the switches. But in this example, I'm going to select 4 switches. When you have those switches selected, click on the OK button. This returns back to the Create New SANnav Policy page, and notice those switches have been added. Next, by default, monitoring is not enabled. So if you want to monitor these configurations for drifts, you want to be sure to click on that. Then you want to review everything to make sure it's correct, and then click on the Save button. This will save the policy and return back to the Policies page. Notice our policy is here. It's called edu_policy. We see the tag and description. We have 4 switches associated to it. The status is monitored, but notice the drift status has a dash through it. That's because this policy was just created and it hasn't done a drift check yet. On the far right-hand side, there is a down arrow. Click on that to open its pull-down menu. You can see you have several options here. One is View. That'll bring up the details page for this policy where changes can be made. We can stop the monitoring, or if the monitoring was already stopped, it would show Start Monitoring here. We can run a drift check manually. We can show drift summary. Currently, this is grayed out because the drift check hasn't happened yet. We can show switches, or we can delete the policy. Notice that is also grayed out. The reason that's grayed out is currently we are monitoring. So if we wanted to delete this policy, we'd have to stop the monitoring first, and then we can delete the policy. So in this example, since we just enabled the policy, I'm going to click on Run Drift Check. This will open up the Run Drift Check status window where it says drift computation for this policy is initiated and may take several minutes to complete. Click on that Close button. This returns back to the Policies page. You can see we have a drift detected and we have a check failed. When you see checked failed, that generally means one of the associated switches could not be reached. So most likely there's some network connectivity issue between the SANnav management server and the switch itself. Now let's take a look at detecting and fixing configuration drifts. So here we see that drifts have been detected on the switches that we just created a policy for. So on the far right-hand side, there's that down arrow. Click on that to open its pull-down menu and click on Show Drift Summary. This will bring up the Drift Summary dialog. By the way, underneath the dialog header, we can see the name of that policy here, edu_policy. We can see that there are 4 switches. 2 of them were drift detected and 2 of them were checked failed. To view the details of the drifts, we can click on Show Drifts. This will bring up the Show Drifts dialog. So on the left-hand side, you see all the configurations within the SANnav policy. And on the right-hand side, you see the configurations that's currently on switch SW2. So for example, if we see syslog destination, we can click on that to expand out the details. And notice the color code there says it's been modified. And we can see that the destination IP address doesn't match between the configuration and the switch itself. And if we continue to scroll down, we can see the configuration here was blank, but we have something that was inserted on switch SW2. Notice the green color. If we continue to scroll down, we can take a look at some other ones. For example, here we see fabric configuration, which is monitor only. In other words, it will monitor, but if we synchronize the drifts, it will not fix that particular setting, which is insistent domain has been enabled. That is true in the configuration, but it's false on the switch. Next, we can see the configurations for SW4, and we see we just have a maps policy issue. If I click on that to expand that out, our SANnav policy says that the maps policy should be edu_SANnav_moderate_policy, but on the switch itself, you can see we have the default moderate policy. Now, if we want to fix these drifts, if we click here next to configuration for SANnav, this will fix the drifts for just switch 4. But at the top, if we click on sync all drifts for all switches, it will fix all the drifts for all of the switches. Again, one note here, anything that's monitor only, it will not fix it, it just identifies it. Also want to point out toward the top right here where it says all switches, you can click on that to open this pull down menu where you can select a specific switch to display the drifts for only that switch. You can also export this information out to a file for further investigation. But in this example, we're going to sync the switch SW4 only. So if that's the only one that's selected, and click on the sync button. This will bring up the sync dialog and it says replacing the configuration on this switch, and you can see the little spinning circle indicating that the process is still ongoing. Once that process has been completed, an updated status will be displayed. This example says SW4 is successful, and it says note one or more unsupported configuration blocks were not pushed to the switch. Click on the details for more information. So we can click on this to expand out those details, and we see that several of the skipped blocks because they're monitor only. You also see several maps rules were skipped. Most of these are for gigabit Ethernet ports, which are not supported on the switch. Others could be due to the firmware version on the switch, which does not support those maps rules. Click on the close button to close out of that. This will return us back to the policies page. So this completes this demonstration on SANnav Management Portal Configuration Policy Management.